Let's talk about narcissistic personality disorder because this is the most commonly requested topic when it comes to the content that I make, and I definitely understand why. I think we're all trying to figure out what can we do to prevent the patterns that we have been seeing within society, and I think some people are even questioning whether or not it is preventable. So, in this video that I just decided that I'm going to break down things tonight, spur of the moment, just wanting to really kind of help people better understand the things that are truly in our control. And here's the great news: there's a lot that's in our control. And so, for people who are new here, just to kind of break down who I am, my name is Dr. Abena Berry. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I also am a author of a 5-star rated self-help book called Bold, Black, and Becoming, a psychology guide to heal and thrive, and a speaker and entrepreneur. And I've been studying psychology and human development and the brain and all of those things since I was really young, initially in response to my own trauma. And then it turned into a passion and a love. And here I am today, right, as a doctor of mental health. And one of my favorite things to do in the work that I do, outside of course, helping people evolve and heal, is to help any human who will listen understand how much of this is actually in our control and how many of us have done this to ourselves without realizing it. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about nature and nurture, right? And I'm not going to go too in detail breaking these things down because I think most people watching this get the gist of it. And that's all we're going to really need to get the points that I'm about to make. So we know that nature is about your genetics, your family history, right, and DNA and all of those things. And we know that nurture is about your experiences after you come earthside, right? That would include positive experiences, neutral experiences, negative experiences, including traumas and everything in between. Literally every experience that you're having is technically a part of the nurture part of things. And so when we think about personality disorders, one of the first things we need to acknowledge and understand is that no one is born with a personality disorder. That's impossible. And the reason why it's impossible is because no one's actually born with a personality. We are born with temperament. People often mistake temperament for personality, but they are not the same thing. They are two different things. And sure, you could argue that temperament are some of the early building blocks of what personality could be, but just because something is a building block of something does not mean it's the same as. We scientifically know for sure at this point that we are not born with a personality. Personality develops over the first 25 to 30 years of life while our brain is developing, and then arguably even beyond that. There will be certain things that are relatively stable about who you are as a person, for sure. And I'm not trying to give you some kind of fairy tale and saying with 100% guarantee that this could never happen if X, Y, and Z occurred. That's not what I'm trying to say. But what I'm saying is that the rates that are happening within society are absolutely linked to our neglect of mental health, our neglect of learning about human development. And we need to start recognizing that this knowledge is not just for people who want to go into the mental health profession. This knowledge is for all of humanity, and it's required for us to manage ourselves well. If we were willing to learn from the mistakes of those before us, and that includes no longer stigmatizing mental health, no longer perpetuating the narrative that this is not something that's for everyone. Because the reality is mental health is our brain. It is our brain. So it applies to all of us. It's relevant to all of us, and we need to understand it. We have to really think about what it looks like when we come into the world as an infant. And when you think about what that means, like when we were all infants, you are literally coming into the world, not a blank slate, right? That's what our ancestors mistakenly thought that too. And that's why it caused us other problems, like people not, being embraced for their authentic selves or being celebrated for self-discovery, but I'll save that for another video. But we're not born a blank slate. There are things that are genuinely, authentically you, right? There are certain things that nature-wise are just going to be what they are no matter what, such as your eye color, hair color, skin tone, things like that. But then there are other things that are not that straightforward and can be largely impacted by our experiences. And so when we think about something like narcissistic personality disorder, in order to understand where that really comes from, we have to start from the beginning. We have to think about infancy. And when we come into the world, we all speak the same first language, which is crying. Crying is actually scientifically shown to be kind of like a language, meaning we have different octaves in which we cry, different sounds that we make based on the need that we have. So it is our only form of communication until we are taught one of the many verbal languages that human beings have created. But we come into the world with certain built-in abilities. We have the ability to cry, we have the moral reflex, we have simple things, but everything else, even something like breastfeeding that you would think a child would know how to latch naturally, even that has to be taught. So when we think about the fact that even things that for basic survival, such as latching on to a breast, have to be taught, like really take that in, then that lets us know that conditioning and socialization play a massive role in how a person turns out. Because when we think about the skills that a narcissist lacks, right, whether it be empathy, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, a willingness to take accountability, these are all things that have to be nurtured in a person after they come earthside. And we do that through examples and critical thinking and nurturing discernment within the person and helping them reflect on their actions and all of that in natural, non-abusive consequences, because we scientifically know that being abusive does not teach anything. This is why we're ending up with so many people with personality disorders. Sure, it will stop a behavior. Sure. Can't debate you on that. We are animals by nature. We are mammals. So you can stop anyone from doing anything if you're threatening them. You can stop anyone from doing anything if you're causing them physical harm. But the reason that they're stopping is because you are harming them, not because they learned a skill. Imagine me being your professor and you come to my first day of class and I present you with an equation that you've never heard of before, and I ask you what the answer is, and you don't know the answer, and all I do is hit you in response to that or yell at you in response to that. Did you learn anything? Have I taught you how to independently solve that equation? No. And in order to do that, I must take time, patience, repetition, question and answer, modeling, all of this stuff, allowing you to practice and correcting that practice. It takes time, and the human brain works just like that. There are building blocks that we have to put into someone, right? We have to start nurturing these things, and we do it the way that a great teacher does in school. And a great teacher in school is going to have consequences, right? But they're non-abusive consequences. It's like you don't study for the test, you fail the test. So you learn self-awareness and self-accountability, but that teacher is going to still be there to support you in the aftermath of that, of understanding where we went wrong, how we can do something better. Great parenting is simply great teaching. And a home should model what a school looks like, a great school. And so what goes on in a great school to nurture a human's mind is what's needed in a home to nurture a human's mind. We must teach, not tell. If I tell you that 2 + 2 = 4, and I've never taught you what 2 is or what 4 is, that means nothing to you. You can repeat what I said, but have you developed an internal understanding of how to do math on your own in my absence? No. And if somebody asks you what 4 + 4 equals, you will be dumbfounded because I did not teach you how to do math. I didn't even teach you number recognition. So this is where we have been going wrong, where there's a conditioning. There's a lot of stereotypes and stereotype beliefs from the past, from humans before us that knew less. We got to remember, we're not supposed to be just doing things from the past over and over again. That would be failure to thrive. That would be failure to progress. We are here to evolve from what we learned from the past, to take the meat and the goodness, but leave the bones, such as abusing children and thinking that's teaching them, right? We are here to be seeing those mistakes and being willing to acknowledge what works and what doesn't work, and relying on the scientific research that also helps us understand the impact that certain experiences have on the brain. We know for a fact that trauma literally alters how one's brain develops. We also know that when you look at the frontal lobe of somebody with narcissistic personality disorder, you often see less complex neural connections and synapses in this area. And if you're wondering what the frontal lobe does, that is, think of it as the epicenter for our not only personality, but also emotional, our relationship with our emotions in terms of emotional regulation, even though there are multiple parts of our brain, throughout our brain, that deal with emotion. This is like the hub, though, in a lot of ways, right? Because this is where decision making happens, impulse control, critical thinking. It's a lot of different really important skills. And so this is why when we look at the brain of someone with a personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder, you can notice often certain differences with gray matter in the brain or neural connections and synapses and all of that and it's less complex, right, in this part of the brain. That's not a coincidence, because remember, we started this by talking about brain development happens over 25 to 30 years. That person was not born with their frontal lobe looking like that. It's a reflection of what their experiences have fed or not. And think of our experiences as the nourishment for our brain or not. Trauma is like junk food for the brain. Actual quality teaching with natural consequences are like a 5-course meal at a Michelin star restaurant. You know, that's what that does for us. And it's like a seed being planted and needs to be watered and nurtured over time through multiple examples, through repetition, through explanation. But again, we know this because if we all think back to the best teacher that we had in school, that teacher engaged in repetition, that teacher engaged in modeling, they broke things down to a simple form, they had discussions with you to nurture your own critical thinking. They didn't just give you the answer. They stimulated your mind through questions and discussion. And they did that over the course of months while you were in that class. And it didn't end there, because once you finished, the 101 class, you had to go to the next level and the next level, because that's literally how learning works. It's a building block thing. And a lot of times people, without realizing it, have a perception of their young children that the expectations are rooted in, like, I've told you this, X amount of times. Why don't you understand it fully yet? And it's like, because that's not how development works. You can't hold a 3-year-old to the standards of what a 40-year-old's brain could be, and emphasis on could be capable of, because trauma can make that journey so much harder for people. But hopefully you're understanding what I mean. This is why us knowing about human development is so imperative. This is why us understanding how the brain works, how it develops, so that we can have realistic expectations about what a human being is capable of at different stages, and then also getting to know them as an individual, because a child who's on the spectrum, their development's going to look different than a child that's not. But we're supposed to be nurturing the individual, because that's also true from one person to another. Even if you just think of it as one child and another child, you have 2 kids, the way they develop, there are going to be slight differences. But there's still going to be this overarching connection of what we know about the human brain and how it develops over time. And so, I'm going to make other videos on this, but for this one to wrap it up and to not make it too long, the point that I am trying to make is that the trauma and the toxic conditioning and the failure to nurture a person's mind, right? Actually teach, not tell. Because I told you so is telling. Having a conversation is teaching. Breaking things down is teaching. Natural consequences, like you drew on the wall, so I'm going to have you clean up what you did on the wall, but you're only 5 years old, so I'm going to sing a cleanup song with you, is teaching, right? Like, that is how we actually nurture the human mind. But we have to understand that the longer we go failing to nurture it well, the more it's impacting that person's development. So you're wondering why now this child is 14, 15 and so difficult. And it's like, because what happened over those 14 to 15 years? How well were you teaching? And I'm not saying that it falls all on parents. It's about the adults within the village as a whole, but obviously parents are primary teachers. But we really have to think about, what did I expose this child to? How much did I pour into them? And this is also why we have to stop romanticizing parenting. People need to understand that this is a job where you desire and enjoy teaching. And if that's not true, then it might not be for you, right? And that's okay. That's another thing that's stereotypically taught in society, that everyone is supposed to like or want the same things from life. That's just not true. That's never been true. But it comes from a time where human beings knew less, so they thought that we all were supposed to desire the same things. But we now scientifically know that you are a unique individual. And so in order to figure out what your ideal life is, you must get to know yourself. And people around you are supposed to celebrate that journey, right? And encourage that journey, not brainwash you into believing you're replicas of them. It gets very confusing, especially when you're a child and vulnerable. When we're a child, we are so susceptible to the messages of the adults around us because we have no frame of reference. We don't know any difference. So if our parents are modeling unhealthy conflict resolution, if the adults around us are modeling not taking accountability, if the adults around us are modeling these aggressive anger outbursts and violence, we cannot then later be surprised that impacted that human's development and they're now engaging in similar behaviors. Your home is a school, so that was the lessons you were teaching. That's what you were modeling. You showed up and showed that, and your child was watching. This is why if you were to take an object that your child has never seen before, and you use it any kind of way, like I wish I have a coasters over here. I wish I could reach them because I have one here. So like, let's say, right, my 4-year-old did not know this was called a coaster. There was a day where I taught him what this was called, or what we decided to call it, since language is a social construct. But let's say he didn't know what this was. And I said to him, oh, this is something that we call a hickory-do, and we take it and we put it against our face so that we don't get too hot. It's cool, so we put it against our face. He would believe that. You wanna know why? He has no frame of reference. He's new here. So if this is his first experience, if I'm teaching him for the first time that this is what this is, and if I were to teach him and do that for over the years, and let's say he just has very limited interactions with other people for a while, which isn't impossible because people don't use coasters as much anymore. But like, let's say he didn't have a lot of examples of seeing other people use coasters the way we traditionally use them. His belief of it being this like face cooler would grow and grow and grow, because it's like me trying to tell you that the color blue is actually called something else today. You would be thrown off by that, right? Because you're like, no, I was taught it was blue and that's what it is. So he would believe that so much. And then even later in life, when he finally sees somebody using or somebody sees him using the coaster and they go, what are you doing? He'd be like, I'm using the hickory-do the way you're supposed to use. And they'd be like, hickory-do, what are you talking about? And he might even get defensive. And we see this with people all the time, right? You try to talk to someone about like, hey, the belief that you have about this has been disproven, and here's the evidence of that. And they're so defensive because of the longevity of the belief. And this is why learning about how our brains work is imperative. Because then we can understand cognitive dissonance. We can understand our resistance to changing our beliefs and be able to discern when we need to stop ourselves from being defensive so that we can learn that this is called a coaster. You know what I mean? So hopefully this helps with like some of the understanding of the things that can lead to personality disorder development, and how it is linked to our childhood experiences. And that's really not understanding enough as a whole about human development. I hope that this video and my many others helps everyone who listened understand that psychology, neuropsych, all things human development, sociology is the blueprint, the cheat code, right, for our humanity, understanding ourselves. Therefore, it is something that we all must be invested in learning about. Doesn't mean you have to want to be a psychologist. That's not what it means. It means that you have to be willing to learn about the manual that is your brain, and that the data from science is teaching us about our brain. And so we need that to manage ourselves well and to break the spells that we've maybe been put under through trauma. But for some people, those spells become so strong, and the things that they were modeled and taught were so problematic that yes, it can lead to personality disorders or personality traits of a personality disorder. And yes, there can be biological factors, but I never want us to discount the intent power of conditioning. It is very intense, and we know this. Look at cults. Look at all kind of, like y'all know. Look at the patterns of generational trauma. Conditioning is a powerful force, and traumatic conditioning is a powerful force. And the only way we can wake up to that reality is to take mental health seriously and to take our mental health seriously.